everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Panelists, thank you so much. Absolutely honored to be sharing time and space with you. We have another Awake, Aware, Arise session for you today. Our panelists here are going to be talking about the Indian manager and stakeholder responsibilities. This conversation is really about sharing perspectives on the evolution of Indian ideas and how they correlate to corporate responsibility in the community. So, of course, I will pass it off. We have Ram here, my Mr. Miyagi, co-hosting with me today, and I'll allow you to introduce yourself and introduce the panel.
Thanks, Nessa, and welcome, guys. Welcome, Gopal, Akhil, and Ravi. Let me start introducing the panelists. Gopal, R. Gopalakrishnan, was my boss for several years. Akhil and Ravi were both colleagues. This was a point in time, almost 40 years ago, when we were together in Unilever India, and we were all connected in a particular environment, in a deeply rural, deeply criminal area of India, where the company had started a major project, which eventually had a tremendous amount of societal significance. So that is one of the things that we would be addressing in terms of what corporates can do in terms of their stakeholder responsibilities, and individual managers can. So I would first pass it on to Gopal, and after that to Akhil and Ravi to share their views, and I would come in and weigh in, and then we'll take whatever questions that we have. Hopefully the Zoom fatigue doesn't prevent the audience number from growing. We have about 20 at this point in time. So Gopal, whenever you're ready, you can start with your introduction and then pass on to Akhil after that. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ram, and great pleasure for me to be here with this program. It's called Awake, Arise, Aware and Arise. And when I awoke this morning, for me it's evening here in India, I found Donald Trump and Joe Biden tearing into each other, and that certainly kept me awake. And then I became aware that the world has got all sorts of guys, and I'm hoping that this evening session we will arise, because we must refer back to our fundamental humanity. And I hope our session will provide a little bit about human nature and our experiences with it. So that's the sort of context. As Nessa said, the session is titled The Indian Manager and Stakeholder Responsibility. All of us know that amongst the most popular subjects in academic circles, especially in the United States, which is the home of management and business research, the most vibrant subject is the soft face of capitalism. It's called conscious capitalism, it's called CSR, it's called SDG, Sustainable Development Goals. There are all sorts of names for it. And in one form or another, most people, whether they are in business or not, have experienced the harsh side of business and the clamor for a softer side of business. So I don't intend to go into that territory at all. I want to make this experiential, because neither I nor Ram nor Akhil nor Ravi is an academic. So we want to talk about it from what we have seen and the journey that we have come across. And I hope, therefore, if it doesn't sound flighty in academic concepts, I hope you will understand that it's probably rooted in our experiences. So I want to explore the subject, or we want to explore the subject at three levels. The first level, the highest level, is at a sort of a global level, where I want to propose for your consideration that the concept of stakeholder capitalism and stakeholder relations, responsibilities of a company and a corporation, are very much related to the local culture and values of that society where that business has come. So when Bill and Melinda Gates go around the world saying we want to recruit people who are going to give away their wealth, I think of it as a very American concept. It doesn't sort of gel, at least for me personally. His call is not wrong, but the manner perhaps doesn't quite appeal to me. Though, without question, people like Bill and Melinda Gates are doing a fantastic job. So I would just like to touch upon that subject, and I call that the global level. I would then like to come to the next level, which I call the firm level. And I have worked in 2 corporations. My colleagues on the panel have worked in other corporations. Between all of us, amongst all of us, we probably have half a dozen companies we've worked in. But I will restrict myself to Unilever, which is what all of us know commonly, which is an Anglo-Dutch company, and Tata, which is a very Indian company, to bring out the differences in the approach to stakeholder responsibility. And then at the last level, as you peel the onion, I want to get to the micro unit level. And in the micro unit level, I will just introduce the subject, but really my colleagues on the panel are far more competent to talk about it. Talk a bit about our experiences and observations for the period 1960s to 1990s, approximately 30 years. And each of us was associated with it at different points of time, around the 70s and the 80s. And I will introduce that. So I want to therefore take the subject like an onion, the broad outside ring, the middle ring, and the inner ring. So let me first touch upon the outside ring, which is this point about culture and tradition of the society where that business developed being a very strong influence on the concept of stakeholder relations. Before industrialization, what is the mark of industrialization? I mean, all our ancestors were farmers. If you go back 500 years, I doubt if there's a single person sitting on this discussion today whose ancestor wasn't some sort of a farmer. And in farming, you could make that much money and no more because nature, physical labor limited the output. So you had a few rich people and a few lots of average middle class or poor people. It is industrialization that changed that. What industrialization did was to make it possible for very ordinary plain Joes to become hugely rich very quickly because productivity could be increased through machines. So industrialization was a major discontinuity over the last 2000 years about how to make money quickly. And that brought with it certain consequences. As all of us know, some are good and some are not so good. And that's part of the way. But I want to relate it to the subject of philanthropy and not to and stakeholder relations and not to other things. So when the history of business philanthropy is updated, you will find that the type of philanthropy that existed, say, in the 1600s or 1700s was basically merchant charity. Somebody made a lot of money in trading or sending a ship out and conquering other lands, and he used that money to support his community, temples, or in India it was temples, wells, schools for girls, all sorts of things like that. And the equivalent exists in other places as well. Industrialization and bringing in dramatic profit accrual in a short time allowed people to use that money, and typically at the end of their lifetime, they would donate it. In America, for a variety of local factors, which I shan't go into now, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the Fords, all of them did this, but less so in other places. In Britain also, Unilever did it. Lord Leverhulme gave away all his money, the founder of Unilever. But something very dramatic has happened because after the agricultural period and the industrial period, the information period has come in the last 30 years. And they made a huge amount of money, unbelievable amount of money in an unbelievably short time. And this kind of philanthropy was people in their 40s saying, I want to give away my money. And I want to see that money being used. And perhaps the greatest exemplar of this is Bill Gates, though others are also doing it. So the idea that you're in business just to make money is a very American idea. That's the principal reason is to make money. Otherwise, you wouldn't have had controversies generated by the Milton Friedman type of economists who said that the only one purpose of business is to make money. And of course, that has played itself out, and now conscious capitalism and CSR and SDG and all have become part of the folklore. So that's the global context and the linkage with the culture and tradition that I wanted to just bring out, and to say that profit making in business is based on skill. If you're not skillful, you don't make profits in business. Whereas corporate social behavior, what do you do with the money that you earn, is based on attitude. While the skill may be common in management techniques, industrial techniques, information technology techniques, the attitude is shaped by culture. And that's the point I wanted to really emphasize. So that much for the outer ring of the onion. I won't spend more time on it. I want to come to the middle ring, which is to talk about it at the firm level. I spent a lot of time collecting my facts together, but I don't need to inflict this on all of you. I need to talk about it only insofar as it's relevant to the subject on hand. But it's interesting to know that the things like communism, Fabian socialism were all invented within the last 150 years. Before that, such concepts didn't exist because they were not necessary. The gap, the Gini coefficient, or the gap between the richest and the poorest was not that high. It could not be that high unless you were a king or a marauder or an adventurer. Normal, decent people did not make that much more money than other people. But industrialization changed that. And one of the beneficiaries of this was a person called William Hesketh Lever, who was the person who founded Unilever. And all that he did was to take a piece of soap and put some waxed paper around it to prevent the moisture from evaporating. And he called it sunlight. And based on, I'm perhaps being unfair and oversimplifying it, but that's important to do. He created this great soap empire all around the world, and which was the parent which created Unilever over subsequent developments. But my purpose is not to talk about William Hesketh Lever and his business empire, but to talk about his attitude. Because I told you, making profit is one thing. What you do with it in corporate philanthropy is attitude based. So when he died, before he died, he set up a factory town on the Merseyside in Port Sunlight, as it's now called, in the UK. I think most of us would have visited that during the course of our careers in Unilever. And it is very interesting that he said, I want this place to be set up not just for making soap or for running a business, but to house a community. Now remember, I'm talking about 1860s, 1870s. And he said, I want houses to be built here, I want schools to come up, and I want the community to feel they are part of something which is much bigger. And he created a trust when he died in 1926 and left his money in the Lord Leverhulme Trust, which has of course done wonderful work, which I shan't go into. But I'm trying to illustrate that perhaps influenced by the Fabian socialism atmosphere of the late 19th century, William Hesketh Lever set up some form of his attitude and embedded it into the company, and all of us have been inheritors of that, whether we are conscious of it or not. Far away, 5,000 miles away, in this country, India, which was at that time a colonial country, under the rigid and almost unremovable tyranny of British colonialism, a person called Jamshedji Tata set up, like William Hesketh Lever, his ambitions to paper and raise money. And he set up an empire which is today called the Tata Group. Again, it's not my intention to go into the history of Jamshedji Tata and what he did, but one of the activities he started very early on was steel. And we tend to forget that back in the 1870s, steel was like gold. And he heard a speech at the Hyde Park where he heard the speaker say that the country which has steel will have gold. And that's how he determined to have. Then he wanted to set up a steel plant, which he did in India, in a place which is now named after him. It's called Jamshedpur. But what is interesting from the point of view of our chat today is that he also told his people, I want you to set up a whole township. I want schools, I want colleges, and I want parks, I want places where people can raise their children. And he had this community approach. I suspect he didn't know William Hesketh Lever, so far as I'm aware, but he must have been influenced by the same ideas of Fabian socialism that William Hesketh Lever was perhaps. And he also left his money. Though he had two sons, he left some of his money in trusts, and his two sons left the rest of the money in the trust. And today, Tata's group of companies is owned by Tata Trust. So, as it so happens, talking for myself, I have worked in only two places, Unilever and Tata. Both of them were started by entrepreneurs. Both of them have left their wealth into trusts. And the trusts have taken their own path depending on the laws and the rules of each country. But they have done tremendous work and are very well known and have given respectability, stature, and a feeling of contribution back to society, having earned money from it. In fact, when the successor to the founder, a person called J.R.D. Tata, was chairman, about the time I began my career, 1969, I was a young trainee officer in Unilever, India, and J.R.D. Tata went to address a Rotary Club meeting in Madras, what is called Chennai today. And somebody asked him a question. I mean, it is just to show how empathetic and sensitive a business person can be. There are, in contrast, many harsh, insensitive people, but I have to look at the positive side. Somebody in the Rotary Club said, Mr. Tata, you're saying that a lot of your profits goes back to society and you're interested in stakeholders. After your time, if you'll forgive my asking, how do you know all this will remain? Somebody could change it. And believe it or not, he came back, he said, that's a very good question. The articles of association of every Tata company was modified and ratified by shareholders, that the principal goal of the company is to earn money for the community. So it is now enshrined, it's there, you can't change it. It's like the constitution of a country. So I'm just illustrating this to say there is a nice side to the businesses that at least I have been associated with. And that to me is the distinction between a good business and a great business. A great business thinks in centuries, not in decades or years. A great business thinks of people and culture. A great business thinks of itself, not as a part of a community, but that the community is the reason why it exists. There's a big subtle difference in this. Am I a part of the community, or does the community exist because of me? So, there is a big difference in the way you think, and I wanted to bring out this point about attitude and mindset of Unilever and Tata. They're very different. I've worked in both, and that's not the subject of our discussion today. But I just want you to remember that most people would regard business as being in the profit-making business, but the distribution of their profits and what they do with it is an attitude-based. And that's the point I want to illustrate through Unilever and Tata. I would now like to move on to talk a little bit about my concept of my experience of trusteeship. This word trusteeship was, I'm not sure who invented it, frankly, who used it first, but one of the people who used it a lot in India was Mahatma Gandhi, whose birth anniversary, incidentally, is day after tomorrow. His 175th or whatever birth anniversary is day after tomorrow. And Gandhiji said that every business is a trustee of society. And the role of the manager is to be a trustee. He just happens to be there. And he wrote a lot about it. He spoke a lot about it. And I wanted to illustrate how long before Gandhiji said it, frankly, Unilever and Tata, and I'm very fortunate I've worked in these two companies, actually practice trusteeship. And therefore, if we can remember the role of business and stakeholder servicing as trusteeship, that's a much tighter word than any other word. And I'd like to leave the subject of, I regard every business which is starting, today the world is absolutely infatuated with startups and entrepreneurship. Right, good thing. Unilever was a startup 150 years ago, so was Tata a startup. But the startup is like what I call the Gangotri. Even the mighty river Ganges, or Ganga as we call it, for those who are abroad, starts, or the Kaveri in the south, starts at a small little hole somewhere on top of a mountain. And then it slowly flows down as nature has determined its pathway and becomes a mighty river, feeding thousands of people, irrigating thousands of acres of land. And a business has to be like a river. It starts as a startup, but when it meets the ocean, it must be a mighty river which has serviced hundreds and thousands of people, given them livelihoods, and is considered the lifeline. In India, if you come, they will say the Ganga is sacred. The Kaveri is sacred. And I don't think rivers are considered sacred in many other parts of the world, though people have those kinds of attributes which they associate with rivers. And I think the metaphor of a river, which is always giving and never taking, we only pollute it. And that has left a sort of impression on my mind based on my experience, which I thought is worth mentioning. Now, I've given you this sort of overview about the global concept in relation to culture. I've given you this brief history of my experience and perception and metaphors of Unilever and Tata. I would now like to get to the nub of the subject, because at the end of the day, it should not look like a philosophy session. This is not a philosophy. I'm not a philosopher anyway. But we are all nitty-gritty business people. I want to say, and one of the books I've written is exactly on this. It's called Doodles on Leadership. I think it appears somewhere here. Is exactly on this, that how a business manager starts as a young trainee, becomes a manager, he learns to head a unit, he then becomes a CEO, and then he becomes involved intellectually with societal affairs. And that is the way that the path of a business leader should also be charted. This micro level of the onion, which is what I want to come to now, where my colleagues who are on this panel have been some of the colleagues who have worked on this, many of us have. Very briefly, I want to take you back to the India of the 1960s. And at that time, it was felt that the country would gain a lot if we had a good food processing industry. And with whatever studies they did, our predecessors set up a dairy, where, as you know, in a dairy, you collect milk, which is produced from buffaloes in our country, not cows like in other countries. And you have to chill it, and you have to bring it to a central factory in a good condition and make sure that you extract the fat and the protein in it in one form or another. That's the function of a dairy. And of course, you could move up and make other products like casein or cheese and so on and so forth. So this dairy was set up in 1964 or 1965. And by 1975, say in 10 years' time, it had lost its money every single year. So it is a normal business challenge, turning around a business. Everybody has had experience of that. And in the standards and the money of those years, in those 10 years, it lost as much money as the original capital investment. So if you invested 100 rupees in a business, in 10 years, you lost all the 100. So your capital is gone and your losses are another 100. It was a pathetic situation. And we had a chairman at that time who, in an American way of thinking, and I don't say this pejoratively, don't get me wrong, said, well, we are not able to run this company efficiently, this particular unit. It's in a place called ETA, for those who are not in India, ETAH. And as Ram said in the introduction, it was and still is in the boondocks, far away from, and a bit of a criminal area for various historical reasons. We found a buyer, but there was a chief minister of the state in which this factory was located, who called the chairman up and said, I want you to come to my city, which is a place called Lucknow. And he said, listen, Mr. Thomas, that was the name of the chairman. He said, are you telling me that you are incapable of running it and somebody else can run this? You must be nuts. So Mr. Thomas said, the fact is we've tried it for 10 years and obviously we haven't succeeded. He said, you're wrong. Other people will take it and plunder it and do other things to it. I'll give you whatever support you need. Please run it. And this is my request. And it happens definitely in developing markets. You're part of a society. You don't just ignore such a request. I don't know if Donald Trump would call somebody and say, don't move this factory from Detroit, and what the response of General Motors or Ford would be. But it does happen in developing countries like ours. So Mr. Thomas came back and he called the person who was then my boss, one Mr. B.R. Shah. He said, hey, you got a very acute commercial sense. Why don't you get on and do this job? And I used to work for B.R. Shah, and there were 2 or 3 of my colleagues. One is Gurdeep Singh, who was a factory person, and there was an accountant called Tandon. And we sat down with him and said, oh my God, we've got a lemon now. We were strictly going by business factors. And then the chairman said, if you're going to do much of the same as the previous years, you're not going to get much further. Have you guys thought of what is it that you fundamentally need to do? Have you gone and talked to the farmers and the society around you? Frankly, I was 30 years old at that time. It sounded like an outlandish idea to me. Though in hindsight, I realized it's one of the finest management lessons I learned. He personally came every Sunday or every second Sunday, sat on what we call a charpai, sort of a rope bed, talked to the farmers to find out what is their problem. The problem was that their milk yield from the cows was not enough. They were mired in poverty. And why would a multinational company making soap and detergent want to get involved with all this? But we did. And we got involved with a program which he crafted. It's called the IRD program, Integrated Rural Development Program. We started with 5 villages, and then I think during Ram's time, some 5 years later, we expanded it to 200, if my memory serves me right, but Ram can talk about it. And it has been a transformational experience. In the very first year, we at least stopped losing money. We made a small amount. In the second year, that increased, but by a wee bit. In the third year, we felt confident that maybe we have plugged the leak, but that doesn't mean the bucket is. But gradually over the years, the next 10 years, it made some money. It is not what made Hindustan Lever the great value-adding share price that it developed. But it was dressed up well enough for it to be transferred and sold at the right time and stop destroying value for the shareholders. So you were able to serve your shareholders. We saved the jobs of almost 20,000 farmers who were and their families, because there was no other livelihood for them in that area because we were buying more and more milk. We saved the jobs of about 300-400 people, both the permanent and contract workers. And in India, you multiply it by 5 or 6 because family sizes tend to be that way. And I must say, I was only 33, 34, 35. I felt very good. I just felt human. That we are not just a money machine. We are also able to influence other people's lives. And it is that story, how it transformed the development of management leadership into a global management mindset. And ETA is remembered by every trainee who was sent there. There was a compulsory 8-week stint in ETA, and it transformed the minds of people because you were coming face to face with the reality of India. Most of us were urban children studied in schools and colleges, English speaking. It had a transformational effect on management. It had a dramatic result on the profits. It had a great influence on the stakeholders, and it brought a great deal of joy to the community all around in the area where that factory was located. And that's the Nabava story about Awake, Arise. I think it is something that Oxford University wrote a paper on. I've got a copy of that paper. It is dated now 30 years. And I would now like to request, I don't know how Ram wants to do it, whether Ram is going to speak first or Akhil is going to speak first or Ravi. But we will use the next 20 minutes, perhaps each of them will spend 5 or 10 minutes talking about their experience.
Let's go to Akhil, Gopal. Yeah.
Akhil, go ahead, Akhil. Over from me.
Thank you, Gopal and Ram and Ravi. Good to see you. And Gopal, the way you brought up from the global picture down to the individual level. So I'd like to carry on that slice of your onion further. Now, ETA, as we know, at the time when we were there, had no railway station, had no television, had no telephone. So it was completely remote in any way, that we were 7 managers with with the families staying in spacious houses, already nowhere to go. That is the point I would like to bring about, and what Gopal ended up by saying, that how he became human and how the whole experience influenced managers and the thinking and the philosophy of the company. I'd like to carry on that thread, that how individual instances, however trivial they were, can actually get implanted into one's mind. And I'm from human resources, so I will relate to my lessons I learned, however small they were, and how later on they got sort of blossomed into some action from me. Now, when people stay in small towns or isolated places, it's very natural for people to feel high level of affinity. It's nothing unusual. ETA was no exception. People who stayed in industrial towns in India like Rourkela or Bokaro, etc., they all feel that was the best place to live in. I spent 2 years of my MBA in Jamshedpur, what Gopal mentioned, and people in Jamshedpur feel that's the best place after Eden. That is nothing unusual. But what ETA did, it had a smell of the place, as we call it. It had a culture, and there's a bonding that happened, created an exclusive club, so to say. So I just saw Gurdeep had also joined. And why would anybody sitting 20 kilometers away in the hill station, holidaying or relaxing, suddenly find that it's good to connect with people who were there at one time in ETA? And that is the connection that ETA brought about. It brought a commonality between people to say there was an ETA flavor in, and there was an association. So I'd like to touch upon 3 points in my lessons learned. One on empowerment, one on bonding, and one on diversity. Now, when we talk of empowerment, books and books written and lectures, people attend on how to empower teams and how to feel empowered and how to make empowerment possible in a real life situation. But I get, this was something that I learned in a way, it came natural because of the isolation of the place. I was only about that time 5 years in Unilever and total experience of about 12, 13 years. So I was not that experienced in Unilever culture or meta, but having been isolated, my boss was far away in a city called Delhi, where without any telephone or no internet, forget mobiles, they were not even invented those days. So I was left there at the mercy of Ram and 5 of my other colleagues to depend upon. And when I use the word mercy in a very positive light, that was the time we had to take decisions on the spot, because the way to communicate to the boss was send a message with a courier who would travel overnight in a bus to Delhi, stay whole day there, travel next day overnight, or maybe one more day. By the time he came back, the problem was over. So it was really no sense in reaching out to your boss, because waiting for the answer was not the answer. As a result of that, a lot of things started happening in my mind, that if I was the boss, how would I behave? Now, this is nice to go to management lectures and talk about this, but here I was feeling the pulse. feeling that there's a team behind me who actually supports, and there's a lot of things that the team does in terms of advice. And we had this very lovely habit of us walking into Ram's office in the morning before we start work, no agenda, nothing, have coffee there, and come out without any formal meeting happening. That may sound so routine. It was not. It brought people who were living in an isolated form as a support system to each other. If something is needed, we are there to support you. And then came the last part, is the accountability. I learned one thing. I cannot hide behind a curtain. And the lesson to learn in empowerment came from there. Now let me connect how this thing got implanted and used. Years later, in mid-90s, I reluctantly left Unilever and went and took over as Asia Pacific head for HR for Motorola. Now with 16, 17 odd countries, right from Japan, Korea, down to Australia, New Zealand, it was just not possible to have teaming the type that we work together. And that is where this spark of empowerment came in. The idea was to live be, let it be, let go. You are there but not there is the principle of empowerment that I had picked up in ADA. The boss was there but not there. The colleagues were there but not there. And you learn to have accountability. And when I started experimenting with this style, I was always there for the team, but not getting into nitty-gritty report, etc., not abrogating, certainly not letting it go out of hand, but empowering came naturally at that point in time. And the results were amazing. One of the finest period that we had in our HR team of growing the business came by then. How much would that be connected data? Lots. And that is how I feel that sometime an incident or a coincidence, Gopal, is it called serendipity? Is the right word?
Serendipity.
Serendipity. So it just happened that you're in the right place at the right time. Am I right? And when that happens, something magical transforms. Let me go to the second part. We talk about bonding and we go for outdoor and outbound, and we in HR are famous for doing all this hoopla around. We must bond together and have all these things around how people can bond and be viewed together. And during this COVID time, the HR people even ring up to find out how's your dog, how's your mother-in-law. And that type of artificial bonding, really, people feel nice that I did it, tick mark. The bonding happens when minds meet, and there's no emotion to this. There's not a friendly, lovey-dovey emotion to it. Is when the real connection happens between human beings. And let me take one example. We had a union negotiation going on for some very major issue. And one night at about 10:30 in the night, which is pretty late in a crime-infested area, the people who were living the large shift, evening shift, did not go out. And they all said, and Ram, you remember, Ajay Veer was the secretary, if you remember, Ram. And there was a group of 150 people who gathered at the gate, and the security rang me up to say they want to meet you. The secretary of the union wants to meet you. So I said, this unearthly hour? He said, no, sir, they're very agitated. They're all in a large group. And in a place like that, don't be surprised if they were armed. Now, Ram, in his wisdom and right thing to do for the team leader, he called all the managers to his house and said, let's physically all stay here. There's more safety in number. And then I decided that, no, I wouldn't shy away from not going. We debated and everybody felt, most of us felt, including Ram, we should not entertain the union secretary to give a petition at this time, let him come tomorrow. And I felt that if we shoo away, they're not going to go away. Why not I face it? So I decided with the team that I will go and meet them. And now there was a big roadway from the guest Ram's home to the factory gate. And that road was very famous. I mean, in a sense, there was a road inside the factory. And I started walking. I had walked few paces. And behind me, I heard a patter of a step. And that was Ravi. And we have got Ravi on the call here. He was following me. And he used one word. Do you think we'll let you go alone? Now, two people together was not important in terms of number. But can you imagine the moral support at that point of time to say, somebody cares, somebody's with me. Bonding happens like this. There's no sense in going to lectures on bonding and talking about what bonding means. Bonding happens when in a place when you're all by yourself and you have people who support you. And Ravi followed me. Along with Ravi and I, we met the union secretary. We talked to him that we come in the morning, we'll not accept anything from you. And we both of us walked back safely from that crowd. And I only surprised some of them armed. This was an example of bonding. Now, when I joined IBM, this was the bonding that actually came around to lead a team of already established people. And the bonding happened that each one would stand for each other, not blindly. But that bonding has to be brought around. So whole focus went around that you will anyway deliver. There's no willy-nilly choice but to deliver. But you will not deliver without bonding with each other. And when that becomes the culture, that the smell of place changes, and bonding became one of the finest traits. And Ginny Rometty, who retired as a CEO, was my head of the business, and CHRO, who was just about to retire, Dan Gerson. They mentioned this in many contexts that the Indian team had bonded to the point of becoming almost one thinking with diversity, not that they're all agreeing with each other. And the last point, very quickly, I'll talk about diversity. You know, Gopal mentioned about this whole idea of villagers and milk collection. And the idea to increase the milk output was led to artificial insemination of local cattle with Jersey cows, etc. And this artificial insemination would actually double the output. I think 3 to 4 liters was the output per day. It would go to 7, whereas the Jersey cows would give anything between 15 to 17 liters a day. This was the idea that the villagers would become more prosperous, and we, in return as a business, would get more milk. Now, this artificial insemination thing had to be sold to the villagers. And I remember, and Ravi, you'll remember, we had adopted one village. And on a weekend when nothing to do much, we would go to that village and sit around on the charpai that Gopal mentioned and drink big glass. It was not a glass, it was like a bloody bucket of lassi or milk, depending on the season. Now, the doctors and veterinarians, when they went to village, they would sell the idea how it will benefit. And culturally, this is where I biggest lesson of diversity. The men would sit with twirling their big mustaches and smoking a local pipe called hookah, very macho. And the women would be at the door of that compound, half hiding their face in what is called a veil, almost non-existent. And after all the discussion with the male folks there and the doctors and veterinarians explaining the benefits, he would turn around to the woman and say, of course, they don't use the name of the woman. They say so-and-so's mother. So they would use the child's name. So so-and-so mother, what do you feel? And if that woman ever said, I'd rather not hurt goddess cow, I mean, they worship cow as a very holy, I'd rather not give her trouble or pain. We should postpone this. And all this twirling mustache wala macho guys would actually turn around in a minute to say, Dr. Saab, let us give it a time, let us think it over. That's the end of the argument. The artificial insemination goes out of the window. Why? Because the silent woman there, whom we actually count as incognito, as a non-existent, was actually a decision maker. Of course, we change our strategy to send women volunteers to talk to women group to change their mind, but that's a different story. The lesson here is that in diversity, we always look for outward sign of involvement and inclusion. We forget the peripheral. And in gender diversity, we actually feel, and I worked in Malaysia and Brunei and Indonesia, and there I learned culturally, the Thai women are hardworking but do not speak up. The Malaysian women are very assertive, but only inside the house. And in the corporate world, we actually forget how we can leverage diversity to the advantage of the organization. And this, what I call the women behind the door curtain, is something we leave out. And the biggest lesson was, and that's where in Shell, when I was involved in the global team to revise the whole diversity inclusion policy, we specifically made attention to the silent minority. That we must take them out of the shadow, bring them into. Now, to end this, where does all this fit in? Was it because of ETA? It is these incidents like in a place where your mind is fresh, your creativity is peak, and your experiential learning is the highest. you realize that you have imbibed something which gets implanted inside you, and it certainly shows up in later on in life in your decision making. So when you go to the decision making level in the pyramid, you actually bank upon this, the flashback to say this worked because of this reason, and can I replicate? So for me, ETA was a big experience. When I was told I'm going to ETA, I went like a cow being taken to a slaughterhouse. Not at all happy, absolutely upset. Um, but when we came out, it was equally painful to leave that 2 years of stint and leave people who had actually shaped me in more ways than one. So this was my experience. And I thought I'll end here, Ram, and hand over back to you, sir.
Yeah, Ravi, if you can share your experiences, and I'll come in after you. You're muted.
Ravi, you're muted.
You're muted, Ravi. You're muted. You're muted.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
All right. I'll try and touch upon all the relevant points while narrating my story with ETA. So I'm a chartered accountant by qualification. And the moment I got selected in Hindustan Lever, both the people around me and myself, we all felt that it's a great career that I'm embarking on. And career as perceived when you join an organization like Hindustan Lever without knowing or without being steeped in the culture within there is about great job, great salaries, great postings, terrific promotions, and very, very highly valued in the marriage market and such other factors. So then we go in, what really happens around is you're going in as a careerist and you look around and you feel suddenly conscious that people of equal or even greater merit are around you at all levels, at absolutely all levels. And then that's where the feelings begin, the feeling of wanting to excel begins. And you are put through this program, particularly I'm speaking as a management trainee, you're put through this program that takes you through all of the functional and business divisions within the company so that you get a total comprehensive kind of a view that can be packed in within about 18 months of management training. And you wish to excel. And when you're doing all of this, there are plenty of projects that come your way because you're given tasks and projects to perform and your performance is assessed, appraisal notes are written, and you want to excel in all of them to build a career. The good thing is, I keep telling a lot of my friends, even to this day, I keep telling them that Hindustan Lever, it used to be called that then, is the finest university I went to in my life. And I meant it very, very sincerely. The amount of learning, either measured in terms of IQ or in terms of EQ, I have never learned in one place as much I have learned in Hindustan Lever. So with all of this being packed in, suddenly I got to the stage where I had to go to the Integrated Rural Development Program. And the day I land in ETA is the day on which the notorious dacoit of that time, the lady dacoit, Phulan Devi, massacred 20 people in a village, all of the same caste and community, as an act of revenge for 2 members of that community that raped her. And I land there. So that tells you about the criminality of the place. And another incident at the same time is My parents get to read about that incident in the next day's newspaper. There are no phones, there are no mobile phones, there is no internet, there's no way to communicate except Hyderabad ringing up Adilabad, Adilabad ringing up Agra, and Agra ringing up Etah, and Etah ringing up Etah, I'm talking about exchanges, telephone exchanges, reaching Naren Nanda, I think at that time, and then me getting the call. It was one of the most confidential calls I had, with 3 operators spread over 3 towns sitting in on the call. And this is how I had to communicate to them, I'm fine. 3 days after that call, I get a telegram, hope everything is okay. The telegram takes 3 days to reach Etah from Hyderabad. And I say, I'm doing fine, all well. It reaches Hyderabad 3 days later. So this is how Etah was through those incidents. I got posted to a village and I lived there for close to 7 weeks. The program is of 8 weeks. And that to me was Earth Connect. You really, literally, even physically, without describing it too graphically, you're connected with the earth. So, and the kind of stuff I witnessed there actually exposed to what extent I was ignorant about a vast majority of people's livelihoods and lives in India. My only experience with villages was to go to my grandfather's ancestral home, everything neatly taken care of, all the facilities provided in the house. And I went through that experience. Then finally, my turn came for confirmation as a manager. And I was sitting in front of Dr. Ganguly. And he asked me, so what did you think about IRD? And it was a project, IRD was a program which he was very, very fond of and well known to be so. And I told him that I am a chartered accountant and I'm basically a finance and accounting guy. I didn't understand the relevance of being in IRD to the jobs that I would be doing in Hindustan Lever, because that was the age and that appreciation wasn't there. I think that appreciation comes as you soak in it. So he asked me a few questions and I persisted that I didn't quite understand still, and I wasn't convinced it's relevant. I don't know. I mean, nobody ever told me the story, nor did I pry too much. On confirmation, I was posted as factory accountant to Etah. And that was as telling, quote unquote, punishment as I could be given at that point in time. And then when I come into Etah, all of things that Gopal and Akhil said kind of began to come together. See, your uppermost thing in one's mind at that stage of career is to excel. And when you are placed in harsh circumstances as Etah, the mind actually works saying, okay, this is a kind of a challenge for me and I've got to live through this. I've got to survive through this. More importantly, I've got to excel because I need to get the promotion, right? Now, just to go back a little bit, one thing that you understand as soon as you enter Hindustan Lever and become familiar with the folklore of the place is, it's an organization of extreme meritocracy. I have rarely found organization where meritocracy kind of weighs in so much on one's career. So every management trainee within a few weeks of being into the training actually sees his path directly to the level of the board of the company. Some would even say it leads to be the chairman of the company. So I would actually call it the meritocracy map. It kind of gets ingrained into your head. You know that if you do well, you can get there too. There are many who have done it and many who have reached there. And those who, for whatever reasons, couldn't reach there, have gone and reached similar equivalent places in other organizations. So with this attitude, you join in this band of 6, 7 people. There is very little you can do in ETA. There is only, it's typically like they say a one-horse town or whatever. There's one movie theater which you would go only when you are desperate to see a movie in a hall and not otherwise. And all that facility that you could think of was only available inside the factory. You run into the same guys, you work with them, you eat with them, you go on a walk with them, you play badminton with them, you play table tennis with them, you sing with them, you drink with them, right? So this is how we live. So it was almost like a team on an expedition, and you really had to learn to work together. So this whole sensitivity about me telling Akhil that I wouldn't let you go alone to the gate is all about that kind of bonding. And cross-functional appreciation of another man's pain, another man's responsibility, all of that comes in that kind of an atmosphere. We are in it together. And everyone who's posted there, in terms of enlightened self-interest, wants to make a success of that posting and go on a promotion and be recognized across the company. This man did this. So that hunger for success is what drove us all together. It's enlightened self-interest. In the process, the kind of stuff that we have done in ETA is amazing. What we've done, one thing we realized was if that factory had to be made viable and profitable, it had to increase its scale of operations. It was operating at 30% capacity, 40% capacity, struggling to make it 50% capacity. Milk production had to be increased over a secular term. So that's where the rural development program, artificial insemination program, also knowledge on crops, cultivation, sanitation, general welfare, infrastructure within the village of the brick-laid roads like Karanja and Paranja, recycling of cow dung or buffalo dung into gobar gas plants, using that for lighting, getting over people's mindsets of how can I use literally bullshit into making gas and use it into my cooking. It was complete taboo at that time. So you had to get over these mindsets. All of these became part and parcel of a hunger to make that stay in ETA a success. And in the course of pursuing that selfish motivation of wanting to succeed, I'm not going to be a failure here, you began at some point to cross that line in the sand when you began to emotionally attach to the success that you are breeding within those villages. See, some of the things that we were doing at that time was way decades ahead of time. We are living in times when people are standing on podiums and soapboxes and talking about Jan Dhan accounts, the name used in India for financial inclusion of the very poor, the lowest and the bottommost rungs of the economic pyramid, people being brought into the banking system. In ETA, a short history again of criminality. The cash van used to travel every day, 6 days of the week, except one day, 6 days it used to travel out on different routes to distribute cash. It is a legendary story in ETA, part of the folklore there, that one of those trips, the cash van was waylaid by robbers and the cashier was shot dead. And that remained, and therefore they enhanced the security around the vans and all. The early stages of rural banking had started when Ram, Akhil, me, and Sunil and others were there, Adhikari, Mr. Chaudhary, Subhash, Kapoor, Subhash Arora, all of us. And there was a lead bank, and they started opening branches in small towns, pretty close to a cluster of villages. I have in my broken Hyderabadi Hindi, which is a peculiar dialect of Hindi by itself, I've traveled into villages along with my colleague Milind Srikande, who's now a prof in Georgia, and have given speeches standing under the trees to 50 or 100 farmers, milk farmers, and pleading with them that they should open bank accounts. And they would complain saying that they would have to travel 5 kilometers or 10 kilometers to go to the bank to withdraw the cash. Whereas in the cash system, they would go to the milk collection center and they'll readily be handed in the notes and they would go. So within the tenure of the three of us here, we converted nearly, I don't remember now, maybe 10,000 accounts or so. 50% of the cash payment system was converted to direct funds transfers to the farmers' accounts. Nowhere in the history I have seen, documented history of levers, there is any big tom-tomming about doing financial inclusion at that time. I must say that before us, Glaxo had done it in the Aligarh area. And we were actually following that model because ETA was late in getting the banking facilities. So this broadly kind of covers all of the things about the emotional bonding, the hunger for success, the desire to turn around ETA, and turning around ETA is the most important ingredient was turning around the villages to be more productive, more engaged in terms of success in dairy farming and agricultural farming and so on. So that is how the story got connected up. And ever since then, there has never been an occasion when anybody would have found me lacking in the empathy or the understanding when very, very dire contexts were talked of in the deep interior areas in India. You know, we talk about in microfinance. I have friends who are pioneers in microfinancing in the country. I've been associated as a director on a very small rural bank whose business size is small, but is operating rural banking with handheld machines today, going door by door and collecting monies and distributing monies and so on. So all of this has stood me in good stead. So I would like to kind of close there, hoping that I have covered pretty much.
Okay. Yeah, I think Ravi's video is frozen at this point in time. We'll get him back. So let me sort of put together in some ways what Gopal, Akhil, and Ravi have said with a little bit of difference in terms of where I came from in this scene. Unlike Ravi and Akhil, who probably felt that they were forced into ETA. In my case, I had a choice to make. I had just come back from a highly privileged expatriate assignment in Unilever in Indonesia. And when I came back, it took about a couple of months. And then I was told that I had two options, whether I could go to a spanking new factory in the detergents business of the company, which was really the star, or this particular place, which I had never heard about before, and which I later realized was totally criminal. And I asked a couple of people that I knew within Levers, who I respected in terms of their integrity. And they both told me that if you're a man, and I don't mean it in any, they didn't mean it in any gender discriminatory way, that you go to this place and it'll make a man out of you. That's truly what it did. I landed with my wife, 5-year-old son, and month-old daughter in ETA. and in a place called Aligarh in the railway station. Like Akhil said, there was no railway station, and we traveled. And then we encountered on our way people carrying rifles and guns and everything I had never seen anywhere before. So welcome to this place. So during my stint out there, yes, I probably pretty much literally faced death a couple of times. People putting guns on my table or threatening to shoot me, all that kind of stuff. Part of the game. But one thing that kept us going, like Akhil said, and as more Ravi said, was somewhere within me was the self-enlightened interest, whatever. And that is what, not only within me, in terms of facing my fears in one sense, and to be able to truly becoming a person who could face odds in life, which helped me tremendously later. And I was hardly about early 30s. Akhil, probably my age, Ravi was younger, and Gopal probably about the same age, a little older. We were all very young, and we were all idealistic. I had, by the time I reached there, the book that guided me was a book called Small is Beautiful by Schumacher, and which was my Bible. And I decided that, and that was very much on the Gandhian principles, and which had nothing to do with charity. And at the first level, I found that whatever was happening there was a bit on charity side. So I put up a white paper, and that received rather unwelcome attention from the chairman. Fortunately, Gopal and Bipin Shah held an umbrella over my head and said, okay, you go on to what you wish to do. And eventually from 5 villages that we were covering went up to 250 plus villages. And from making marginal contributions, we made something remarkably different. But more than that, what I learned at that time, which was a philosophy that stood me in good stead much later, and that's something that I would really like to lead to in terms of discussions with the panel as well, is that there's nothing wrong for a company to make profits. In fact, the only reason the company exists is to make profits. I don't think any company designs itself to make losses, but it's about how it spends the profits and how it enriches the community around it, like Gopal was talking about, that I didn't realize that it was actually put into the shareholder agreements of the Tata companies. It's fantastic. That defines really the Tata culture, that the purpose for which the company exists is for the larger community. And if every company were to think that way, and today that term is also changing from shareholder to stakeholders, that it's not just the investors who are invested into the company, but everybody around it, from the people who buy from the company, supply to the company, to people who are in and around the company, in any way impacted by the company in one way or another, positively and negatively. They're all stakeholders, which is what in coaching conversations we today call as a systemic approach in terms of doing that. And that made a huge difference. So my question really is that today, this was an experiment that Levers did 40 years ago. And Levers still continued with some of that in later times, but in nothing on this kind of a scale, which benefited not only the profitability of the operations. And Gopal, just for your information, Dr. A.P. Mahadevan's son is on the audience. So Dr. Mahadevan was the father who put up that amazing person. I'm so glad that Kanan is here. And also the fact that, like, Ravi was a trainee, I didn't even realize that he was actually a trainee in ETA before he became the factory accountant, because when I met him, he was already there as constant ETA as a factory accountant. And there were probably about 500 trainees over a period of about 7-8 years that I oversaw that operation, who passed through, and we still connect in some way or another. And whenever we talk about ETA, it's really a fascinating recap of memories that we had. Now, the question always comes up for me, what if we were to replicate that model in multiple ways in terms of enhancing the socioeconomic status of what's happening around us today, be it the migrant workers, be it the, I don't know, whatever, the caste discrimination and various other kinds of things. And strangely, one of the things that I experienced, and I'll stop with that and we'll take it from there. When I was in Indonesia, I was in the international school. I left Levers. In Levers, I went to Indonesia for a couple of years, but later I left and then went back to Indonesia to do work. And at that time, my children went to international school called the Jakarta International School, one of the best in the world. And I was an elected board member there. I was a vice chairman for a while. And one of the things that we did was to try and experiment with teaching entrepreneurial business, social skills, social entrepreneur skills, as it were, to high school students. And later, when I went to Singapore on my own, after my stint in Indonesia, as a consultant and with my own company, I did some work with Raffles, which is the best known school in Singapore, and a few others trying to do this. And then in Bangalore for a short period of time, typically in class 9 and class 11, because 10 and 12 in India are stressful years for the kid. So it was easier. One of the things I found was it was amazing that how these kids, hardly about maybe 15, 16, 17 in that age group, they even, not necessarily the ones who come from wealthy families, not ones who come from business families, but even kids who came from poorer families, they were able to appreciate the whole, let's say the process and the etymology, as well as whatever needs to be done in terms of business. And it was very, very quick. I was amazed at the speed with which they were able to pick up this. We used a form of games to play big business games with them, to sort of give them basics of marketing, supply chain, selling, and all that kind of stuff. And from that time, I've been trying to inquire with various people, why don't, I mean, today there is phenomenal amount of, let's say, curriculum, syllabus, content available for teaching business at schools. In fact, Cambridge University has got some really amazing literature. And if you really go through it, you'll find that it's MBA level. It's the same thing that is being taught in a B school. However, it may be not as much detail. So if companies could start mentoring kids, unfortunate part of it, all this is taught by people who have no idea what business is. If, as managers and executives, we take some responsibility, the companies take responsibility in terms of mentoring kids at that age in different schools, and they adopt them or whatever and start teaching them. And then the next step, they go for maybe 2 or 3 years of college training. There's absolutely no need for B schools. To me, the B schools are a total waste, destruction of the economy. You pay a hell of a lot of money. At the end of it, the companies end up by spending more money on them to train. And 50% of them are successful, which is tossing the coin. But you could humongously save money if you were to do this. And everybody I talk to say, hey, it's a fantastic idea. But who's to build the can? And can there be some kind of a stuff that is started there? And that whole approach goes to multiple things in our country. The corporates are in the best position to be able to help, not the government. The government, by and large, is corrupt. Any government is corrupt, whether it's India or any other country. But the corporates have a reason to exist. They have reason to exist because they want to make money. They are smart in making money, but they have reason to exist if they believe that they serve the interests of the community, be it hygiene and health, whether it's education and welfare, social justice and whatever. These can actually help the companies make more money. Just like the blue ocean strategy in marketing, if they are able to build that loyalty in communities by what they do with the community, there is going to be a return for them to be able to generate more revenue, more profits. And that is what we did in ITA. That's all that we did. What we did was in our self-interest, working our butts off, going to the villages, working with those farmers, helping them one way or another. And we made it very, very clear to them because the whole system was pretty corrupt. They would circulate a dead cyber cow. Those days, they were very, very advanced in technology. There was a piece of paper that used to circulate in the form of a buffalo. And that would serve the purpose because somebody would go to a market and buy the cow or the buffalo And a few days' time, they would report it as dead, and everybody responsible would also sign and collect and default on the payment. So we tried to stop many of those things. People like Akhil and Ravi were we were all trying to change that system. And we said, no charity. Unless you do something for us, pay us forward in terms of what you receive from us, we will not do that. It didn't sit well in the beginning. But that is what helped us with a budget that we had for 5 villages to expand into 250 villages. And Dr. Kurian, who founded Amul, once came to Agra, and I was summoned there, actually. He had heard about me from somewhere, and he dressed me down and said, you are a traitor. I know that you're doing a great job, but you have no business doing it for a multinational. You are the kind of person who should come and help us. I said, sir, I'm totally grateful to you, but I'm doing a job that I love, and I think I'm doing a equally good service as someone was doing, and I only need your blessings to make it as successful as Amul is. And he actually turned around and said, yeah, I wish you well. So it was something which was extremely powerful that drove each one of us. And that same vision can today empower the way that corporates, executives, and managers could perhaps launch in terms of initiatives to do this, and which is what we are really trying to get done through this whole process of Awake, Aware, and Arise, in terms of awakening the need for us to stand up and to take responsibility, become aware that we have a responsibility, and rise up with that action to fulfill that responsibility. So I'll stop here, and in the next few minutes, we have about 10 odd minutes, just get Gopal, Akhil, and Ravi to see how is it that we can take the story forward. It's all good to reminisce about what we did in ATA. Of course, we did a fantastic job. That was 40 years ago. But today, if we need to help people in whichever way, move out of their socioeconomic dire straits, what is it that we can do? Thank you. Gopal?
Oh, I thought there were going to be questions from the audience, if there are any.
There's some comments, but there are not many questions as such, as of now. But if in the audience anyone wants to ask any particular questions, please do. I think they have been far too enthralled and probably intimidated by the experiences that we've shared to ask questions, perhaps. I don't know.
I don't know if they're enthralled, but I hope they weren't bored.
Though the numbers are not large, but they all stayed. I don't think anybody left, except Gurdeep. He said he had guests, and so he had to be.
But you have a recording of this later on.
Yeah, it'll be on YouTube, yeah.
But if I might just jump in on the point that you ended with, I think I made the reference to the fact that there's a difference between a good company and a great company. And without boasting about Unilever or Tata, I might have, and all of us have probably given the impression that there are elements of greatness in a Unilever. And I would say in Tata, though we didn't discuss it. And I have been fascinated by the subject of how many institutions do we have in the corporate sector in India? And I did a research program with the SP Jain Institute of Management recently, and with great difficulty managed to identify without controversy just 6 or 7 names of things that show signs of an institution. And along with the academics who worked with me, defined what are the characteristics of an institution. Hindustan Lever has done this very well, and so has Tata, as I have to say, by extending this ETA type of experience to Sumerpur, Orai, Chhindwara, and heaven knows many more which came after my time. And I think it's, I hark back to the point that I made that it's not about how much profit you made, but it's about your attitude to your responsibility. And if companies have the attitude that I exist only to serve the community, I'm allowed to earn a living and reward my shareholders, we would have far greater progress in India. And therefore, I'm of the view that while I did write about Unilever and Tata because they are very old, 150-year-old institutions, but I wrote about more recent institutions. India's focus should be on building great business institutions. And that would help to do what you just said. I'm very enthused by that idea.
How do you define a business institution as different from a business, Gopal?
I define a business institution as one which has what I call 3+5. That's what we have done in our research. It's in our books, and I won't go into a spiel on that. That there are 3 things very essential which every institution does. And stated telegraphically, item number 1 is that they release people power. And people power in its multiple dimensions. Item number 2, they develop and imbibe in their people critical thinking. And we've defined what's critical thinking, not just keep the boat afloat. And the third one that we have said is that they believe that they have a responsibility which is well beyond the company. There are 5 others, I won't go into that. I think we have defined what's an institution, we've drawn a table for it, and it appears in every one of the books that we have written. And I'm hoping that it will help to trigger at least a debate and create. If you look at our stock market, these 6 institutions we have written about account for over 30% of the market cap of Bombay Stock Exchange. And it does not include Unilever, it doesn't include Tata, it doesn't include Godrej, it doesn't include Reliance. It doesn't include Infosys, it doesn't include Wipro.
Would you like to name them?
Oh yes, the books are out in the market. So they're all companies that came into existence only in the last 35 years. One is Biocon, one is Larsen & Toubro, one is Tata Consultancy, one is Marico, one is HDFC, and one is Kotak Bank.
Wow.
So you got some heavyweights, some flyweights, some medium weights. And if you look at the reach and the way these companies have extended themselves into the community, it's very impressive. They're not the only ones doing it, by the way. I don't want to give the impression there are no others. We are not getting an award. But I'm very enthused that building institutions should be the motto of corporate India and not building great companies. They're not building good companies. And the mindset of a good institution building CEO is very different from a good CEO. And we've tried to bring that out through these 6 books that we have written. So I hope I responded a bit to your question.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Gopal. So Akhil, you not only from company's perspective, but you were also the chairman of NHRD or president or whatever it was, and you've been pretty active in that role as one of the thought leaders in the whole HR. So what is it that you believe, especially the HR community and the top leadership of corporates can do, to build these kind of institutions, and at the same time, they contribute to the community in multiple ways?
So Ram, I think the whole notion that a company exists for profit is nice theoretical armchair talk, frankly. Every CEO says that, every senior leader says that, because that's how they earn the credibility that we are here to increase profit and return on for stakeholders. I'm not against the whole idea. It's nothing to do with making profit a dirty word. But if you see some of the traits of great organization that Gopal is referring to, not good organization, they have 2 things in common. One, they're very conscious about the impact they have on the society or the, I wouldn't like to use the word planet, but it's a cliche, but on the planet around them. And how do they leverage the human resources to make that happen rather than money resources? And I'll give a typical example where I had the privilege to work with Shell. Now, I was intrigued in the beginning to look at the sustainable development programs where they were investing substantial amount not only money, but time and energy into developing alternate energy. Why would a company selling oil, which is energy as its product, go and propagate the idea of solar energy, energy from the waves of the ocean, uh, windmills, and you name any alternate energy, and Shell was willing to invest. Idea was not to look at Shell's profit or sustainability. The idea was to look at the global sustainability of the planet itself. And this was not just a big talk. It was converted into a hardcore implementation project. And that's where the human resources came in. They used employees as ambassadors, as volunteers to participate. They did not only hire consultants or give it to third party and say it looks nice and publish thick volumes of sustainable development programs. They did. In addition to that, they make sure that the employees themselves were involved. And as a result of that, the employees felt sense of purpose. When tsunami hit northern part of the Malaysian peninsula at that time, we had deep pockets to subscribe to development projects and recovery. But in addition to that, when I proposed this idea that we will have employees go and volunteer to do work, that worked better than giving money. So we had busloads of people on weekends going to Penang, 5 hours drive, and people brought their families along, 3 to 4 hours drive. And they worked with hands there with the community developing, and Shell giving support to those people to work in the community. The point, Ram, here is that you cannot just be there for the profit. You have to be there for profit because you owe it to the stakeholders. But if you take on responsibility beyond your shadows and make sure that the human resources that you have are feeling part of that effort, there's a sense of purpose that gets developed. And today Gopal will bear with that today if there's one thing that drives human resources in any organization to stay, develop and grow is a sense of purpose, especially the new gen people. I mean, don't give them extra money, but if they have a sense of purpose, they feel that my organization is adding value to the society, I belong. So Ram, idea is that not to just talk about sustainable development and not to do CSR. I personally have a very strong view against CSR. And from human resources and HRD network, I started an initiative called individual social responsibility. Give time. And we did work with children of sex workers in Calcutta. From months together, we did some work with them to take them out of their environment to make sure that we make some impact on that social being. And this is all through people's participation. And so HRD network type of organizations can galvanize resources together, but it is the foresight that is required to say that can we see beyond our nose? Can we just say we exist because we are growing hard? And the 6 companies or 7 companies that may feature in the book or in the stock exchange may feel very nice as PEs, the PE ratios and the profitability that they give, but do they really feel satisfied that they have contributed? And what is the happiness ratio of those companies? If you look at Wipro today, and Gopal, I don't know if you did some research on Wipro, but if you see the happiness ratio of companies like Wipro and many others, I'm just not singling out one, their return on their investment is far higher than what the balance sheet shows. So Ram, I would feel that the idea is to not to live for yourself, and organizations who live for themselves don't last very long. They have to live for others, and not as charity, but as a part of social connectivity and not responsibility also. That I owe it to the society and I'll do something about it. And Shell was a typical example of that.
Ram, if I may just add to the point that Akhil just made, some of the respondents in the interviews we conducted in our business institution project said, I am CEO, I'm not the CHRO, but I am the Chief Empathy Officer.
Empathy Officer.
And if I can demonstrate empathy, then the HR department gets automatically empowered.
Absolutely.
The HR department is the most discounted department in most companies. But you don't strengthen it or empower it by just talking about it, as many managing directors do, but by your leading with empathy. And Hindustan Lever is a good example. I'm not saying every CEO is equally at it, but if you take the top leadership, there's a great deal of empathy. Certainly in Tata's, I have seen it. Anyway, I'm sorry for that interruption, but I just thought I would add.
Gopal, you make
Gopal.
a good point. Some of the questions that have been asked here, Vinita and a couple of others, I mean, they sort of asked two questions. One is about, is there going to be any shift in the way that leaders think after the pandemic? And the secondly, what is the role of HR? The only thing I can say is, yeah, we can sort of complain about the status of HR, but there have been companies like in Levers, for example, business managers went into HR roles and HR managers went into business roles. And we have one person here, Harish Devarajan, who started with us. He did a marketing program. He started as an HR person for a long time in HR, and then he became a general manager of P&L manager. So there are companies which do this, and I like that's the ones which Gopal refers to as institutions. Not everybody does that. And in the pandemic, things are going to change dramatically, in my opinion. There are areas of businesses which are going to be downsized. There are areas of businesses which are going to climb. So again, it's not as if that one-time shift is going to be forever. After some time, that becomes the new normal, and therefore there is something else that is going to happen. So the fundamental rethinking has to happen each one of us. The question is not about why doesn't this happen elsewhere? And for everyone here, I would just ask you a question in terms of your own awareness, in terms of what you want to do. What is that one thing that you're going to do tomorrow, which is going to make a difference in terms of the status quo? And how committed are you to be able to do that? I think if each one of us makes that decision, even in a small way, and in whatever capacity we have, we are able to inspire, influence people, either to YouTube and so on and so forth. And we should be able to do that. So I think we really need to take the view that it starts from us, each one of us. And that's really, I think, what matters. We are pretty much on time in this thing. Thank you very, very much, Ravi, Akhil, and Gopal, Nissa for hosting, and all the audience for staying with us for so long. I'm deeply honored by the conversation that I have with the three of you, and this will be available on YouTube for your community as well. We'll be sharing it with each one of you. So please do get people to see and listen to this conversation. It was tremendously enlightening. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. God bless all of you and our audience.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ram, for having us over, and thank you, Vanessa. Ravi, good to see you, sir. And Gopal, you too.
Thank you.
Bye guys. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Vanessa.
Thank you.